Watches and Wonders 2024. We're here. We're going to tell you about a lot of the stuff we've seen. It's episode 78 of A Week in Watches. I'm joined by
Zach Kazan, managing editor, Worn & Wound.
Yes, thank you for joining me here in Polexpo in Geneva, Switzerland. We've been here for who knows how long at this
85
point.
days.
85 days.
Yeah, we've been here for several months at
yes,
this point. Yeah.
Yes, we've seen a ton of watches, we've had a ton of meetings, and we're going to go through some of the highlights from the show so far. Before we do, I would just like to invite you all to join us at Wind Up Watch Fair San Francisco in a couple weeks, May 3rd through 5th. At Fort Mason in the San Francisco area. There'll be, I think, even maybe more brands there than there are here.
Yeah, more brands at Wind Up than Watches and Wonders. Who'd have thought?
Yeah, don't quote us on that, but yes, there are. And yeah, it'll be a very exciting show. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Now let's dive into Watches and Wonders. So we're actually standing in front of a booth. That's a pretty good place to start. Tudor, you might have heard of them before.
I think the highlight was the Black Bay 58 GMT. Probably not a watch that I would personally reach for, but I think it's pretty significant in that it's a watch that the community has been asking for like 5 years at this point, and they delivered on it, and I think that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I agree with that. Maybe it's not even fan service. It's a logical watch for them to come out with. It's not all about us.
Logical extension, but I mean, it's certainly something that if you're on watch enthusiast forums or in any part of the enthusiast community, people have been asking for this watch for a long time. Yeah,
we had the Black Bay Pro a few years ago, a watch I'm obviously fond of. I purchased it, but it did not quite scratch the GMT itch, I think, for a lot of people. Plus there was concern over the thickness, warranted or not. The new watch is thinner by about 2 millimeters, which is not insignificant. It felt really nice on the wrist as well. And it's a master chronometer, which is just a big step forward, I think, for the brand in general. So it's a very compelling watch, especially south of 5K. That was Tudor this year, obviously a big hit from this show, but not the only hit. Another brand that I think we both were really, really excited about was Grand Seiko.
Yep, the SLGW002 and 003. Yes. Definitely kind of the highlight release from Grand Seiko. They're thin, hand-wound versions of the Evolution 9 case profile. They work really well. They take the white birch theme in a different direction. Dials kind of conjuring birch bark as opposed to birch trees. On the wrist, they're just really good. It's a really thin case. The titanium is super lightweight.
Between the movement and the case design, just like everything that kind of those of us nerds who have had a few Grand Seikos kind of want. It kind of is everything from a few different watches put together. And I like the Evolution 9 series. I like the white birch that came up before, but at 38 millimeters with a 20 millimeter lug and just under 10 millimeters thick, it's like the perfect version of it. This might be the most wearable Grand Seiko, almost.
It could be.
Yeah,
it's a really good case.
So super exciting. And there was one really cool feature about it is the winding mechanism. They have this little bird-like click on it, but they really thought about how it feels when you wind it and how it sounds.
It feels like a vintage watch, really, when you're winding it, like in a really nice way. It's
like
very
satisfying, like a Unitas
tactile.
Or something like a clunkety, but in like a good, very
great.
Cool. Yeah, and there was also the Kodo and some other great things from Grand Seiko. You should check out our content on that and our previous video we shot for some more depth there. So the next brand I want to jump to is probably the brand most people talk about first, but we're weird, and that is this other brand behind us, Rolex.
So they have a new GMT with a black and gray Serichrome bezel. Interesting release. A lot of people were expecting a different bezel color arrangement. I think the Rolex releases this year were kind of muted. It was sort of considered a quiet year for Rolex. I think the most talked about Rolex release is actually the new 1908 in platinum with that sky blue dial with a guilloche pattern.
Yeah, they're not known for doing textures, really. So this is very uncommon.
Not really, and it's just kind of unusual that the talk of the Rolex side of the fair is a dress watch. Because you just associate them so much with their sports watches, and so I just think that's kind of interesting too.
The other side, what I've seen some people talking about, is also just what they've discontinued, which always seems to be part of the story.
Yeah.
I believe the Le Mans that they just launched is already no longer available.
Yeah, not surprising. I mean, that watch was an anniversary watch celebrating 100 years of the Le Mans race. So not a shock, I think, that it's discontinued, but obviously a watch that's generated a lot of attention. both positive and negative, I think, for a variety of different reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is no more. Very short production.
Very short production.
Rolex, yeah.
Moving on from Rolex, another brand that was a real highlight for me, something I'm really excited about, was JLC, who have revived their Duomet line of watches, which are this incredibly cool and sort of under the radar line from JLC that was first launched in 2007. And what these watches, this line of watches do is try to solve the issue of complications draining the power from the watch, thus decreasing like the accuracy of the timekeeping, particularly noted in chronographs. When you run a chronograph, it sucks out power, lowers the amplitude of the movement, and it can cause a decrease in accuracy. So their solution to this is to have 2 barrels and 2 gear trains linked by 1 escapement. So you have these big, beautiful, robust movements, and then these really incredibly complicated dials and just really beautiful, fascinating watches. They launched them in 2007, they kind of went out for a while, and now they brought them back. 3 models, chronograph with the moon phase, a time only with a moon phase, and then a tourbillon perpetual calendar, because, why not? What did you think of these ones?
They're really beautiful. The watchmaking is obviously impressive. It feels like JLC kind of like flexing and showing off in the way that they sometimes will, just because they can. We saw that a little bit last year with the reverso chronograph and the skeletonization capabilities that they have. This is a different kind of watchmaking flex, I think. Much more technical, but like the watches themselves are just like incredibly beautiful.
Yeah.
And surprisingly easy to wear because they're a little bit larger and precious metals, so they're kind of heavy, but like they just have this great presence on the wrist.
The previous versions really had this very like neo-traditional sort of aesthetic to them, and they had German silver movements, and speculation, but I'm not the only one to speculate this, but they were maybe sort of made to compete with a certain brand that also uses German silver movements, Lange Sohne. And these new ones feel like Jaeger-LeCoultres. They do not feel like they're competing with anything. They're really in the JLC's language, and I don't know if they'll be contentious to be for people, but I think they honestly probably make more sense now as JLCs. They're much more contemporary and they are much more rounded. And it's also, when you mentioned the case materials, for the first time they have one in steel. At a bargain price of something like $44,000, still a very expensive watch, but it is interesting that they went that direction. Maybe make it a little bit more wearable as a practical watch, if you would.
Yeah, I guess. If it's if practical is a flexible term, I guess.
Well, I already just mentioned them, so we might as well talk about them. But Lange Sohne had a couple of releases this year, and they were nothing short of spectacular. What were they? Yeah,
so they're celebrating the anniversary of the datograph. Their big release this year is a datograph, perpetual calendar, tourbillon, and honey gold, and it's a lumen.
Okay.
So it's like all of the things that you want, all the cool things that Lange does, kind of like pulled together in one super watch. And it's crazy. The loom treatment on this watch is really, really cool. The presentation, they have a like a UV light that they charge it up with, and let you see it really nice and bright. It's very impressive, and it's just Lange kind of like doing what Lange does best. It's just like really high end watchmaking. It's wild.
A super flex indeed, with a price to match, as I recall.
I think it's a little over $600,000.
A little over $600,000.
They're not making many of them. It's quite a thing.
So from there, let's go back to something a little bit more obtainable, a little more accessible, a little more familiar, and that's Oris, who had a very strong year, but not in the sense of like big splash watches. Rather,
it was iterative.
It was iterative.
Yeah.
They refined the Aquis.
They made the Aquis better in just about every way that you would want it to be better. They made little adjustments to the dial. The date window is now matched to the color of the dial, and the colors look great. Case is a little bit more contoured and a little bit thinner, so it's easier to wear. They have a new quick adjust mechanism on the clasp of the bracelet for the in-house version of the watch with their manufacturer movement. And it's just a really, logical kind of like evolution of the watch that a lot of people really associate with Oris, I think. So
and
it makes
predates
sense.
A lot of the other things that they've become known for in the last several years. The Diver 65, the pointer dates, like the Aquis has always been there.
It predates the obsession that everyone has with integrated bracelet sports watches.
Very true.
So I'm really glad that they kind of decided to really focus on that line, and they didn't like go overboard with something crazy or wild, but they made like a really solid update to, I think, what is a very important watch to the brand.
And I feel like that's also even a little bit of the theme of this year. I mean, last year everything was really new and fresh and brand new lines, and this year we're seeing more like continuation models. And I think Oris is probably one of the more successful examples of that because they genuinely evolved something. It's not just new colors again or something. It's a real update, a real refinement.
Absolutely.
So we talked about a lot of like big established brands and some from big groups and things like that. There's also a lot of independent watches here. You checked out Moser, right?
Yeah, I saw Moser yesterday. They have a new Streamliner tourbillon with a skeletonized dial that is absolutely insane. I'm a huge fan of the Streamliner platform. Probably my favorite bracelet of any integrated bracelet sports watch. And so this watch is just wild. Like the dial is just really amazingly done. The skeletonization is great. They also showed us their new Pioneers. They have a 40 and a 43 millimeter Pioneer, both with green dials. The 43 millimeter Pioneer has a concept dial with no markers or indices or branding of any kind. It's a very kind of like almost fluorescent green, very, very bright. 40 millimeter version, which is the case I prefer, has a darker green with the traditional kind of like Pioneer dial layout. They're doing really nice work at Moser.
My last meeting was with a brand that they actually own now, which I don't think everyone is aware of, and that's Alt-Lange. So one of the new pieces they had this year actually uses the movement from the very first Alt-Lange, but in a new case. They're known for their TV case, this really wide case, but this is a smaller version in titanium. And other than that, they're known for just wild complications. It was beautiful. I really liked their watches. I feel like at one point they felt like really zany, just chaotic, and now to me it's like they're just really interesting watchmaking, which is nice to see and to think about. And that now that the Moser Malin family is behind it, I think there's like a little bit more of a robust, probably backbone to it.
For sure.
They also had one of the craziest watches I've seen in the entire show, which was a concept piece called the Retrovision 47, which was based on a Bakelite radio. They just wanted to think, what would have this brand have been like had it existed, back then. Honestly, it's hard to describe. It's green, marbled color, looks like a radio, it has a tourbillon in it. But they made it for fun, and it was like everyone smiles when they brought it out, which is, I don't know, one of the wonders.
It's Watches and Wonders.
It's wonders.
It's part of the, it's that half of the show.
So another independent that we actually had the chance to sit down with the CEO was Chaik and C, who launched a new line this year called the Promenade, which feature métier d'art dials, enamel dials, guilloche dials. We actually talked to Xavier, so let's hear what he has to say about them.
We decided that we would make the child of the Quai des Bergues our first watch with the Antarctique to create the Promenade. And we created it in the smallest and I would say sleekest expression of it, playing with what we love, which is the métier d'art, enameling and guilloche making. And so that's the first two new models of our new collection called Promenade, where you can see a new design, a new pattern of guilloche, which we called Rising Sun, the Soleil, and a new design of enamel, flanqué, which is standing for Ripples on the Lake. These are two kind of mesmerizing dials, all of them powered by the magnificent SX5. It's not me saying it, it's you guys, who has been created from a blank paper, because that's the best way to create something that fits both the aesthetics and the technique. And that's it for the moment, but stay tuned, because in 6 months we'll certainly come with a new surprise.
So yeah, the new Promenade line from Chaik and C I think is a really nice addition to their line, which was previously really focused on the integrated bracelet Antarctique, and now has this dressier, smaller, thinner model that's a little bit more artistic in nature. Always nice to see. That brand is on the up and up, as they say. We were just talking before, and a brand that took you by surprise was Raymond Weil.
Yeah, so Raymond Weil was literally just came from that meeting, and they had a big kind of splash at GPHG last year. Very unexpectedly took home an award. It was a challenge category, the category focused on more affordable watches, and they have these really nicely executed sector dial watches that I was just really impressed by. The dials are very classic, they look great, and the cases are They're about like 38, 39 millimeters. They're very, very thin and very, very well finished for a watch at that price point. They have, 3-piece construction, brush and polish finishing, really sharp, very distinct. I was very impressed by them.
It's also cool. This is their first year at Watches and Wonders. They're definitely on the more accessible side of the fair. They might even be the most accessible brand here.
Among
with,
them, for sure, yeah.
Oris and Mercier.
So Bremont.
Yeah, and Bremont.
Yeah.
So there's not that many watches in the like sub 5K category here.
Yeah, it's nice to see a little bit of branching out, a little more variety of watches, not so much a high-end luxury all the time. It's nice to have a little bit of everything.
A little bit of grounding every now and then. Yeah, so there's really just been a ton to look at Watches and Wonders, a ton of new releases. Be sure to check it out at wornandwound.com. But before we go, there was one watch that had a pretty special number associated with it, which was 45 million
45
years.
million years.
That's a lot of years.
Do you feel like PAL Expo will be here in 45 million years?
I think we've already been here for about 43.
Yeah,
so
we're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there. So very, very possible. Yeah, that's the IWC Eternal Calendar. We have a lot more on that on the website.
Very
now.
impressive watch.
Yeah,
sure.
like big feat of engineering there. And yeah, please check out wornandwound.com for a lot more coverage of Watches and Wonders 2024. We have a lot more also on YouTube, so be sure to, of course, like and subscribe if you haven't already to check out that content and stay on top of more to come because we are not done yet.
Not even remotely.
Yeah, in fact, we're not done in Geneva yet either. We go from here to all the other things.
There's so many other things.
So many other things. So we're going to have a lot more to bring you soon. Thanks for joining us. Close with the Pro. It didn't quite scratch the itch for people.
The confidence with which you just walked through. Just like...
There's nowhere else to go.
Oh my goodness. Look at these. Filming you.
We need like tape around that.
Yeah.
You'll be guest stars on this show.